We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's February 1st here in Seoul. I'm Shin Yeun, and this is News Generation, where young people make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kim Seong.
Good morning, yeah.
Good morning, and Cheska Dae-hong.
Happy February, everyone.
Happy February.
Happy February.
Both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Now, every day we will make a news feed for the new generation, and we're looking at the top trending hashtags on social media over the past 24 hours. Here they are. The first hashtag trending here in South Korea is Sam Smith. The British singer trended on Twitter for their latest single, I'm Not Here to Make Friends. The singer has been the subject of backlash since releasing their music video on Saturday, with some people saying it's over-sexualized and somewhat degrading towards the LGBT community. Some Korean tweets also expressed shock, while some applauded Smith for having the courage to do what they want. The second hashtag is no masks. Many Korean tweeters raised questions over the recent lift of wearing face masks indoors. As we also discussed in News Gen on Monday, in the first time in 27 months, we no longer need to wear masks in most places, but because there are still some places that require them, the recent measure is being considered rather confusing. The third hashtag is ChatGPT. This is a chatbot launched in November last year by an AI research firm called OpenAI. You can ask ChatGPT anything, as it will look through millions and millions of articles and compiled database and give you answers straight away. The younger generation was curious to hear what it had to say to the question whether or not we should invest in Tesla. On Monday, Tesla's stock upgraded to a buy rating, and the AI chatbot said it can't predict the future of Tesla and suggested people to go talk to a financial consultant. And from this week, we delve deeper into one of the three hashtags. Today, we'll look at the second one, no masks. Taxi companies have been asking drivers and customers to wear their masks at all times. But this is causing confusion because people aren't sure whether taxis, specifically chauffeur services, are included as public transport methods, which are where masks are still required. Some drivers went on social media to say that it wasn't fair that they had to wear masks when customers didn't have to. Now let's use this time to hear from the director of South Korea's COVID-19 task force and find out where exactly we're still strongly advised to wear masks.
Though it's not mandatory, we're strongly advising people to wear masks at densely populated areas. They may not be included in the list of places that you are required to wear a mask, like hospitals or public transport. That includes buses, subways, and taxis. But if they are places where you can't easily ventilate or are close to other people, it's safer to keep your face mask on.
So taxis are included in public transport methods, but not chauffeur services. And I think it's definitely confusing, right, Cheska?
Right, absolutely, yeah. So it has caused a lot of confusion among the people because there are a lot of exceptions and auxiliary conditions to these mask policy, which is a little bit broad and elaborate. Taxi was a very good example, yeah. But for instance, boarding on the subway, so on the platform, you don't have to wear a mask. But as soon as you're about to step onto the subway, you pull it out and have to wear it. So a little conditions like this confuses the public, and I think it is somewhat understandable given that we're trying to take very cautionary measures and slow transition into becoming mask-free. However, it is obvious that the public has confusions over the exact conditions of when and when not to wear masks.
Right, as you mentioned, we're only on the first step of the two to completely return to normal where we don't have to wear masks, and experts think that's going to be around May. But until then, as Cheska mentioned, it's very confusing, and I'm wondering how it was like for you for the past few days.
I mean, obviously, as you mentioned on the newsfeed as well, it's been 27 months that Korean citizens had to wear masks everywhere. And that mandate has been eased in the past few days, well, yesterday actually. And I was actually personally very excited. I was waiting for the day I could get my mask off and wander around, get some fresh air. I love winter air as well. I mean, that really allowed me to think, oh, you know, I'm not going to put on my mask. But on the day, yesterday itself, I totally forgot. And I went into my apartment's elevator and saw everybody not wearing a mask and wondered, oh, what's happening today? And then I realized that, oh, okay, it's fine to not wear a mask. And I went to the office quarters, busy office quarters and busy streets of Seoul. And so actually most people were still wearing their masks.
Right.
And that made me think, just in case you might catch another transferable disease or something, I should just keep on my mask just in case, of anything negative happening.
Right, and for those of you who are still quite curious where you have to wear masks in Korea, they include nursing homes, welfare centers, inside public transport, hospitals, and pharmacies. Now that was our news feed for today. Moving on, NewsGen discusses different topics each day, and here's what we have for you today. Depending on how old you are in Korea, you may have different thoughts pop up in your head when you see someone wearing earphones like this. Some of the younger generation may be familiar with wearing earphones to help them focus at work. Some of the older population may find it rude to wear earphones and ignore coworkers. Today, NewsGen looks at 3 questions. 1. Why does Korea have a wide generation gap? 2. What are some stereotypes behind the older and younger generation, respectively? 3. How can we avoid conflicts from wide generation gaps? Wireless earphones have become a comic element in Korea thanks to a popular comedy show. The stereotypical 꼰대 would seem to not like it if their junior or coworkers wear these earphones at the office because it seems like they're not open to conversation. And today we'll be talking about this 꼰대 culture in Korea. Before we go on, Xiong, define 꼰대 for us.
Of course, I mean, in Korean, 꼰대 is a colloquial term that loosely refers to condescending older people. The 꼰대s are notoriously self-righteous and characterized by their disregard for personal space and giving unsolicited advice along with forcing supposedly outdated ideas onto the younger people. The slang 꼰대 was originally used by students and teenagers to refer to strict and stubbornly unforgiving older people, such as overly authoritative teachers and your parents. The widespread of this offensive term did have a positive effect on our society as well. As more of the older generation try to better understand the younger generation and treat them with respect, we see an increase in horizontal work culture away from the toxic hierarchy that existed before. However, the word 꼰대 is becoming increasingly problematic in the Korean society. According to Korea Economy Daily and 한겨레, these problems are not only targeting the older generation. Recently, the new terms such as 젊은 꼰대, which means young 꼰대, it is becoming easier to categorize people with more traditional or conservative ideas with negative perceptions. The usage of the word 꼰대 is becoming more general as well, the meaning more colloquial and vague, leading to Korean society to increasingly refrain from freely voicing their opinions and thoughts compared to the past.
So it's not really having to do directly with age then?
Exactly.
All right. And why don't we do an OX quiz, if you can take your signs right next to you. Please. Oh, you have it in your pocket. And we're going to do an OX quiz, yes, on whether or not we are 꼰대. And the first question is, would you guys immediately stop using honorific Korean speech? And that's when you express respect to your elders or when you talk to elders, as soon as you find out that that person is younger than you?
I mean, for me, that would be a no. I wouldn't be just, colloquially speaking, as soon as I know they're younger. Korea is traditionally an extremely hierarchical society where it's based on the Confucian notion of respect for others, especially your elders. And I mean, this can be very sort of structurally suffocating. Just because you're older in age does not mean you deserve extra respect. And if you speak Korean or ever lived in Korea, you'd probably run into situations going to restaurants, stepping into a cab, or even schools and your friends as well, where people will just automatically lose their honorific speech as soon as they realize you're just even a year or two younger.
Right.
Which can be, very offensive to some. And in Korean culture, some of these sort of elderly marketplace shopkeepers using the non-honorific term is deemed as a sort of a term of endearment. So it's a fine line between an offensive term and being sort of friendly and nice to, as your connection between these people.
Right. And what about you, Cheska?
I agree with Xiong on certain points, but I'm back to the double no's. But for me, I know I have a very particular speech pattern when it comes to people. So younger, same age, older, regardless of the age and social background generation, I always use honorifics. And I think this kind of comes from the fact that I want to treat them as individuals. And I also don't know the age of any of my friends.
Right. Yeah. So honorific isn't about like how old you are. It's supposed to be an expression of respect.
Of course.
Right. And the next question is, if you see a junior or younger coworker come in late at work, would that bother hear you, and would you go up to them and say something?
Would you tell them off?
Yes.
I think we're getting into an interesting territory.
I mean, yes, because even though I might not be able to tell them off because of my position, which cannot be that high up, I'm still a young professional, but I think it is necessary to have that sort of advice, being, scolded, maybe a little maybe a little offensive for the Generation Z or the young person who thinks, they have the right to come at time late,
Right.
which is definitely, which doesn't make sense, and it's just an objection of the basic work ethic, to be honest. And I think that's why it's perfectly fine if they call in advance and tell tell the office no, for this and that reason I'm going to be late. But it should be definitely, to a certain extent, be mediated. Let them know that it's a problem.
Right, I see. So as long as they call you in advance, you'd be okay, right?
That should be perfectly fine.
Okay, I think we found the middle ground there.
That's pretty nice.
What about you, Cheska?
For me, I probably would not even know what time they're coming in, and I think...
Because you turn up late.
Oh, wow! That was a good point, possibly. But I also think that it's not in my position to talk to the younger, older, regardless of the position. But again, I think I care more about the quality of the work that is done, and it's completely up to them to decide when you want to come in, but please don't be late if you work for me.
Yes. All right. And lastly, do you find yourself using the term back in my days or back when I was doing your job frequently?
I think I already know Xiong's answer for this one.
That's a great question. It's a yes for me. It's a yes
smiling.
for me. I mean, because I want to say this at the definition of gonde as well, but Korean society, a lot of the gonde I think originates from the military culture as well.
Right.
Every single Korean male citizens are required to serve in the military. In the past, it usually be up to 3 or more years. Nowadays, it's 2 to 1.5 years. And even for me, whenever I meet even the same age group, my friends, who's gone to the army later than I have, I would say, oh, mate, back in my days, or 나때는 말이야, which directly translates into back in my days.
Yes.
I'll say things like that to describe how worse my situation was when I served, because it's never been pleasant.
And when you say that, do you consider yourself to be 곤대?
Not really. I mean, I think
think
that's the problem, because a lot of us, we use the term gonde as more of a comedic term, more of a colloquial term. I'll say something like, mate, back in my days, I used to get paid in sacks of potatoes, or something like that, just to make a point and get the laughs out.
When were you born?
Did you serve in the World War II?
Yeah, it's 1945. That's when I was serving.
And Cheska, what about you? Do you often say this?
I mean, you can already know my answer by the fact that I'm laughing at everything that Xiong is saying. I've never used it. I probably won't use it. And the funny thing is, in Korea, it's actually become quite a colloquial and funny term. So they have these cookies and like biscuits with latte written on it back in my days. And they were given to the seniors and managers. Kind of as a gift, but sort of a tongue-in-cheek kind of way.
I see.
You want my latte, basically.
Exactly. So through this quiz, we found out some traits or standards where you could find out whether you're this colloquial 꼰대 or not. And Cheska, based on this, do you think there's any conflicts that have arisen from this 꼰대 culture in Korea?
Absolutely. I think just apart from the emotional conflicts, I mean, just based on the answering the question between Xiong and I, even though we're very similar in age group, you can see that our opinions differ.
Right.
So it has nothing to do with age. I think it has to do more with the attitude and the way that you interpret these kind of things. So I hear there's a lot of conflicts at work, especially given how you come in at work on time or leave on time. So I think there are definitely generation conflicts.
Right. And why don't we use this time to hear from a millennial in the States on what she has to say about this 꼰대 culture? Now, joining us through Zoom is Amy Che. She's lived almost her whole life in the States and is currently a marketing manager at Antler Korea. Great to have you joining us, Amy.
Hello, Amy.
I think we're having a little bit of a sound problem right now. Amy, can you hear us?
Oh, hello?
All right, we can hear you perfectly now.
Nice.
Now, Amy, we would like to
you.
ask you, we would like to ask you if you heard about the term 꼰대 or how wide the generation gap is in Korea.
Right. So, 꼰대, yes, I've definitely heard about it. I feel like it's been getting more popular nowadays due to a lot of viral contents and community programs. But just before we dive in, I just want to say that I believe generation gap is something that's inevitable and prevalent in any country or group or community, but some places might have it more severe than others. And so as for Korea, we are one of the Asian countries that's been influenced by Confucian ideas, and one of the traits that still strongly remain in our society today is the social relations between the old and young. But as you guys mentioned before, nowadays it's not even the old against the young, it's more like attitude versus a different sort of attitude.
Right.
So yes, gonde is very prevalent, or gonde term has been very, commonly used. And yeah, I think as for Korea, it's just a little bit more.
It's more.
A little bit more. It's more common. Yes.
Right. Now, I would like to ask you two to ask a question to Amy as well.
Sure. Amy, gonde is a Korean word, but based on my experience abroad as well, I've seen some generation gap in the workplace. What do you think about that? What was your personal experience in the US?
Right. So what I recall from my experience living in the US is, let's say, I don't want to say like gonde culture, but more like generation and age gap. We've always had terms like dad jokes, or which directly transfers to 아재 개그 or 아저씨 개그.
Right.
And these terms were like they were on the internet since way back, like 10 years ago, Facebook meme times. And I feel like recalling those things, I think in the States, from my personal experience, I feel like the older generation that I've interacted with or worked with have been a little bit more conscious or aware of the generation gap itself. So I feel like the people that I used to work with have kind of put in the efforts to narrow the gap by keeping up with the younger kids, or kind of following up and asking like, oh, do you guys like use these slangs nowadays? Or like, what do you guys, where do you guys hang out nowadays? And, even back in my days, like that's also very common, like storytelling thing that the boomers kind of enjoyed. Yeah. So there is that common characteristic. But I don't think I always like connected the older people to have been like the stubborn or like the condescending ones. It was just like, the age gap was there. Yeah.
Right. And Cheska, if you have a question for Amy.
Sure, Amy, you've kind of addressed it, but do you know some examples of these policies or efforts in companies and how they can be applied to sort of deter these negative effects of gonde culture?
So my work experience might be kind of limited to like startup companies because we're always like very fast paced, but we highly prioritize performance and efficiency at work. And in order to kind of push these or elevate these traits, the HR policies kind of emphasize or encourage workers to be always honest or like speak up. And even when you feel uncomfortable, that's when one should be even more truthful and honest, so that everyone in the room could be heard. And I can see a lot of Korean companies trying to implement these rules as well, because these policies do help with performance. And
definitely.
But from what I hear from my friends or other people who work in big Korean corporates is that the reality is a little bit different, and it's hard to be put into practice right away. It's hard to be the only odd room in the room in the beginning, right? So I think for Korea, I feel like there are these two different parties. The people who want to stick to the more traditional rules, and the ones who are more acceptive of the new culture and new generation. Definitely. But I feel like both groups should make the effort to kind of understand together. That there is a difference. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much,
eliminate
Amy.
the stereotypes.
Sorry, due to time, we can't hear more. We would love to hear from you more in our future casts, but sorry, due to time, we'll have to cut it short. Yes, and it's
These are great answers.
Exactly, and that was some great insight that you've given for us today. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you very much, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
All right, now given that we are a live morning program, we always ask our viewers questions related to our discussion topic in advance. Now here's what we had to say. If you take a look at the screen, we asked our viewers whether they knew the term 꼰대 and experienced one themselves. Pillow Chauffeur said there's boomer in the West, as in okayboomer, but calling them names won't solve societal problems. Mary Jane Westerlund said, I can think of similar words, but with a slightly different meaning, like old codger, which means old and difficult. Benny, he said, we do have some 꼰대s, maybe elders at work, but I also think we do not have a word like 꼰대 in our country. Now, if we can briefly look at these comments, which of them fascinated you the most?
I mean, for me, I think our viewer Pillow Chauffeur made a great point, coming up with names to stereotype the older generation. Obviously, is not the solution to the problem, and will only lead to more negative problems in the future as well. And widen the generation gap, of course, yeah.
Exactly. What about you, Cheska?
I completely agree with Xiong. I think Mary Jane mentioned it. Label never solves a problem. Definitely. It only categorizes and classifies. And I thought kodja was a very interesting term as well.
It is, yeah.
Definitely. And we upload questions related to our discussion topic for our viewers to answer. If you want to participate, please search Arirang News on YouTube and look into our community tab. The link is right below. Now, because we've been so passionate about today's discussion, we can't go too deep with our final talks.
Don't think so,
but I would like to end off with Cheska saying, any ways to prevent conflicts from these widening generation gaps?
Oh, that's a very good question. And Xiong, if I may, I would like to give a quick tutorial.
Yes,
We've seen this somewhere.
Tutorial. Do you remember this?
Am I speaking? Is that me?
Now,
Professor
Professor
Kim?
Hong is back. I would like to give you a AAA solution for 꼰대s to become MZ's favorite boss. Number 1, ask and accept. Ask for feedback and accept opinions. Number 2, acknowledge. Acknowledge them as individuals and abstain from asking too many questions. Number 3, appreciate and act. Show appreciation for little things. Thank you, Xiong. And show, don't tell. Act, and you will earn appreciation and admiration.
All right, the AAA solution from Cheska. All right, today we talked about 꼰대 rather passionately and the generation gap that has been causing some conflict between the new gen and older gen here in Korea. We'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you the topics that young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Xiong.
My pleasure.
And Cheska Dainong.
Thank you so much. Pleasure's always mine.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.